In this video, I'm going to be chatting about what the solar return in astrology means and what is it about. Basically, the solar return is your astrological birthday, your birthday in astrology. So you were born on, a specific month, day, and year at a certain place at a certain time in that place. And so your sun sign was at a certain degree in minute when you were born. Whenever the sun hits that same degree in minute a year later that it was in your natal chart, that is called a solar return. Now, this corresponds to any planet. When any planet hits that same degree in minute as it is in your natal chart, it makes for a return. That planet is returning to how it was in your birth chart. And this is, individual. This is looking at predictive astrology. This is sort of in that wheelhouse. And, countries can also have birth charts. For example, the U.S. was born in 1776, metaphorically speaking, or it's just where the Revolutionary War, Declaration of Independence, all those things happening, and so the U.S. had its Pluto return in the year of 2022, and it came around several different times, and so Pluto, the planet of death, rebirth, transformation, destruction, and evolution, came back to the same degree and minute, but especially just looking at it from just the degree standpoint, it came back to that same degree as it was when the U.S. was began officially. It came back to that same degree um, you know, as it was when, the U.S. got started. I think looking at the degree and minute is probably more critical and more important if you're looking at a planet like Pluto or Uranus or Neptune, because those are more generational. They are slower moving. They have much more of a collective impact. And so that degree and minute, the minute with the degree becomes more important. But I think with the solar return, with the sun changing signs, roughly every 30 days, then I would say looking at the degree and the minute. For your sun when it returns, when you have your return, your new year, new beginning. So you're born during a certain sign, during a certain season, and between the signs of Aries through Pisces. And so you're going to be experiencing your return on your birthday or around your birthday. It can depend. Some years it's the day before or a day or two after. And we're looking at that straggler day, which is February 29th. I don't know why there's an extra day, and it comes around every 4 years, and there's a leap year. I just don't understand that. But so interesting. So you can have your soul return the day, after, for example, and the sun can hit that same degree in minute after the actual day that you were born. So this shows your year ahead. The soul return acts as a new beginning. And it sort of shows based off of your soul return chart, because you can calculate a chart. And this video is more, information based. Maybe sometime I'll do another video, showing you, the visuals of how this looks, and maybe get more personal with my solar return chart. But it sort of shows what influences you'll be experiencing, what experiences will occur in your life, what will happen in your life, what will, the situations, people, places, events that you'll be experiencing and that you'll be in, and what will be happening based off of astrological significations and influences in your solar return chart, which you can calculate. So, it shows those influences. And so, it's how do you want to shine this year? Because the sun deals with your ego, it deals with your individuality, where the spotlight is on you. And it deals with, just sort of conscious awareness and you being an individual. So how do you want to shine this particular year as an individual? And so a couple of different things with the chart. You want to look to your natal chart placements. The chart placements in your soul return chart become really important, including the sun, the moon, and the rising sign. Those are the three. I like to think the astrological trinity or something like that. Where the Father, Son, Holy Ghost, that kind of thing like that. But so the moon shows sort of emotional nature and sort of how you'll show up, emotionally, how you'll express those emotions, how you'll be feeling, how you need to be nurtured. The moon is very feminine, deals with instincts, intuition. So it sort of shows those kind of qualities and how they're going to be for you that particular year. And the rising sign is sort of how you put yourself out into the world, your connection to situations in your life and circumstances, your environment sort of maybe indicates the, body type, in astrology, just generally, obviously, there is, genetics, and, let's, draw the boundary on that. But the ascendant can also show physical features, and it sort of shows, physical features of yourself. And it also shows the kind of soul path and soul, direction where you're sort of being guided toward, or, ascending toward, rising toward in this lifetime, and what your soul is moving toward, and what your soul signed up for in this lifetime to become. And there's several other astrological factors with that, such as, the North Node, for instance. But it shows that. And then the sun is your ego. So, looking at your sun sign in general, what element is it in, and how compatible is it? Or, what element is your sun in, and what element is your ascendant in? Are they both in fire signs? And, they sort of, there's a bond there. Is one in fire, one in air? Or is, for example, if your sun's in Leo and your rising is Taurus, and you have Taurus rising, obviously there's going to be a conflict there, since Taurus and Leo square each other in astrology. And squares are 90-degree aspects representing tension, but ultimate, difficulty that propels action and change and evolution. So, the rising sign is how you interact with the world. Now, other things that you want to look for. The rising sign indicates how you interact with the world. You don't want to take one part of your natal chart or one part of your solar return chart, including the sun, and say, that's the be all end all, because that's not. And just in general, you have one placement, but then you have a lot of other things going on. So the whole chart needs to be taken into consideration, in astrology. So, the angles such as the ascendant, descendant, and midheaven in the natal chart. The midheaven is always at the top of your chart. So it shows, kind of how your potential highest calling, sort of, destiny line, purpose, the career sector in your chart. So that's at the top of your chart. The ascendant is, opposite the descendant, which, you're moving away from whatever sign your natal ascendant is in. So I have Sagittarius rising. My descendant would be Gemini. So, the angles become, really important to look at. And also, the sign or the house that the sun is in. The houses in astrology are areas of life. So there's houses 1 through 12, and they correspond to the 12 zodiac signs. The first house being self and the individual, and your physical body and your identity, and the 12th house being spirituality, reflection, the kind of invisible realms, and things like that, self-reflection, all those kinds of things. So, you can look at the houses and learn about the houses in astrology and see what house that your sun is in for that particular year, because it's going to be different depending upon, the year, and that particular solar return for that year. And, that solar return acts as your New Year's Day. Collectively, January 1st is New Year's Day, based off of the New Year in numerology, because every year, say 2023 is a 7-year, so it begins on January 21st. March 20th is the astrological New Year. Sometime in February is the Chinese New Year. And, your own personal New Year, beginning, I guess you could say, is your birthday, but in this case, your solar return. And those can be the same thing, but I don't want you to just say, oh, your solar return is your birthday, because, while that's true, there can be some differences and complications with that, and they may sometimes be different things. Because again, that leap year that comes around every 4 years, and just in general, if the sun hits that same degree in minute as it is in your birth chart, and it may be on a different day besides the day that you were born. So don't assume that it is that, and don't necessarily confuse the two. So, the house that it's in, the house that your moon for that solar return chart is in, the house of your ascendant. Also, the signs, the personal planets, Mercury, Mars, and Venus, what signs are they in? What houses are they in also? And so also, if you're looking at the chart wheel, what kind of hemisphere, because there's 4 different hemispheres of your natal chart, east, west, south, north, and it's going to be looking different. It's sort of, how it's set up, and all those hemispheres indicate, have certain meanings if you have a lot of planets or points. in that area of your chart, then that area is, really strong for you as an individual and as, a spiritual being living a human experience. That, it's really, stronger for you. It's more significant for you. So you want to look at the hemisphere where there's a lot of planets or points in that particular area of the chart, and what hemisphere is dominant. And I mean, in general, it should really be just around the time of you were born, that you were born, because because the personal planets travel, really quickly, from sign to sign, and they stay relatively close to where the sun is. So, where you find a lot of planets in a certain hemisphere based off of your soul return should be similar from year to year. But looking at the hemispheres where there's a lot of planets or points in that particular area of your chart, if you use the chart wheel version of a natal chart or a soul return chart. And then you also want to look to the modes in astrology: cardinal, fixed, and mutable. And if you have a lot of planets with signs, either in cardinal signs, fixed signs, or mutable signs, especially the moon and the personal planets, Mercury, Venus, and Mars. And so cardinal signs are very action oriented. They're about leadership. They're about taking the reins of your life, being a pioneer, having to get up and go to make something happen. The fixed signs are more stubborn. They hold down the fort. It's all about will, focus, determination. I'm staying the course with this goal and I'm, achieving it. And so there's a stubborn quality with those signs. And then the mutable signs are more flexible, adaptable, and changeable. They sort of, more go with the flow signs. And the seasons, they sort of lead us into the next seasons. They're, transitional signs. So, it goes in the order of cardinal, fixed, mutable. Aries is cardinal, Taurus is fixed, Gemini is mutable, and it just continues until you get to Pisces, and that cycle just repeats. But, you want to look to where you have a lot of cardinal, to the modes of the signs. So, for example, cardinal signs are Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn. Fixed signs are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, and mutable signs are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. Critical degrees also. I was reading around, seeing different kind of, interpretations, from different astrologers, and on, Cafe Astrology, it did say, the author, the writer of that particular site recommended looking at the critical degrees. So this would be 0 degree and then the 29th degree, because there's 29 degrees within a given sign. The planet, when it's transiting through a sign, it begins at 0 degrees and then it ends at the 29th degree. The 0 degree is more new beginnings. It's fresh. It's, really focused. It really is intensifying or heightening that energy where it's really, really strong. And then the 29th degree is more transitional, ending. You're sort of, know this area of life really well and you're moving into something new, and the 29th degree is really intense. It can be volatile. There's an urgency with the 29th degree as well. And I've heard that it brings out the shadow sides of the particular sign that it's in. So that's, a little bit about the degrees. And so, you want to look Because when you have a planet, in a sign in a particular degree, let's say the early degrees, obviously it's a brand new area of life and there's a lot of lessons to learn of where you need to evolve and where you need to grow more. But then the later degrees, particularly the latter degrees, the 29th degree, is where you're sort of wrapping things up, culminating things, and you're very super mature, super evolved in that sign, that area of life. So, that's just a little thing there about that. Um, and so also, you can celebrate your soul return however you want to, because it is, your birthday and the sun represents you and the individual and what you want to do in your life. But it can also be a time, where you can just reflect on the year ahead and maybe plant new seeds, set new intentions upon what you want your next year to be. What do you want to achieve and who do you want to become in that next year, and what do you want to do in your life with that next year. So, you can certainly use your soul return in, really meaningful ways that are special and, that they matter to you. So that's about the soul return in astrology. I hope that you enjoyed this, and I'll see you in another video.